Hello, and welcome to my podcast. This is Lori Daybell, and I'm about to let you know all about the ins and outs of creating a functional analysis of the behavior that children with ASD often display and how to help them mold that behavior, because behavior is communication and it's also learned. So in creating a functional behavior analysis, your first step is to specifically define the problem behavior. Be sure to describe the behavior you're going to target without opinions or judgment or any preconceived ideas. In discussing this, we're going to look at some sample kids to kind of get an idea about what it might look like in real life. So let me introduce you to my three children. Christopher. Christopher displays this behavior we often see in classrooms. When given an academic task, Christopher often engages in off-task behaviors like jumping up from his seat, interrupting others, drawing on paper, not starting on an assigned task without repeated redirection and prompting, and, if frustrated, elopes from the classroom. Now let's meet Becca. Becca, when at home, has difficulty completing chores. She's given a chore to complete, and she'll often engage in off-task behaviors like hiding in her room or the bathroom, saying she doesn't know how, asking someone else to complete the chore, or engaging in a non-related preferred activity like leaving the chores and going to play on her computer. Now let's meet Xiomara. Xiomara is showing us a behavior that we see both at home and at school. When Xiomara wants to play games on her computer, she'll cry, scream, repeat her wishes over and over again, and bury her head in her arms, or throw her tablet when the preferred activity of playing video games is halted. So now that we've met our three friends and heard about all their behaviors, let's look at the second step, which is to observe and assess the behavior in order to gather more information. You can do this across various settings using both direct and indirect assessment. Observations of the behavior as it occurs is a form of direct observation. Fill out an ABC chart looking at the antecedent behavior, the behavior and the consequence of the behavior as the behavior occurs. Record the frequency of the behavior, the intensity, and how long the behavior occurs. If you're observing a tantrum, you'll want to record intensity and duration, but if you're just recording how often the behavior is occurring in a given observation, then frequency data is often sufficient. For example, in the Christopher and Becca scenarios, a tally of defined off-task behavior can be taken. In Xiomara's scenario, you'll want to also track the intensity of the behavior and the length of time that behavior continues. Another way to gather data is through indirect assessment, such as interviews of parents, the student, and teachers, and the use of inventories and checklists. Giving the student a preferred reward or activity checklist also lets you know what things will be most motivating for the student. In this case, you want to gather information about specific behavior across environments. What does the behavior look like at home? Are you seeing it in the classroom, on the playground? Do you see it during preferred activities or only during non-preferred activity times? The third step in this process is to determine why the behavior is occurring and what the student is getting or avoiding from continuing the behavior. There are four functions of behavior. They are to escape, to gain attention, to get tangible items, and sensory stimulation. It's important to note that a behavior can serve more than one function. In this case, determine the primary function to target and replace with an appropriate behavior. Prior to developing your plan, you also need to determine, is there a skill or a communication deficit or a sensory issue occurring? You need to figure out if the student is capable of the task is able to understand the task and have the skills to ask questions, or if sensory needs are impacting their ability to be successful. Sometimes, before you alter the student's behavior, you need to alter the environment to be more supportive of the student. So the hypothesis of the function of our three scenarios above, or that we've talked about, are as follows. The hypothesis for Christopher is that he is using his behavior in order to escape the task. There may also be questions about academic skill deficits that make the task too difficult for him. Becca is using her behavior in order to escape the task. A secondary function may be to gain attention, as she is adamant she requires others to help complete the chore with her. Since she also has ADHD, she may require visual support in order to be more successful. Xiomara is using her behavior in order to obtain a preferred item. She may also have sensory stimulation and communication needs, since she is bearing her head in her hands and becomes echolalic in her communication. Now that we've defined the behavior and determined its suspected function, it's time to move to the fourth step in the process. The fourth step is to develop a plan that includes a functionally equivalent replacement behavior, FERB in education speak, and provides a reinforcement in order to decrease the undesired behavior and increase the FERB. Identify the replacement behavior to model and reinforce. In our three scenarios, Christopher will use a visual checklist, a skip card, and ask for help in order to complete the assigned task. The visual checklist will help him get started on the task. The skip card gives him a limited choice to do the task now or at a predetermined time later in the day, and asking for help will keep his frustration levels down. Becca will use a visual checklist for the assigned chores to keep her on task and can ask for 5 minutes of help from another family member if it is needed. Xiomara will use a visual timer for the length of the preferred activity and ask for more time and use a 5-minute timer if needed. Next, you need to identify the preferred reinforcement. There are different types of reinforcement. In schools who use a PBIS system, positive reinforcement should always be your first choice. You can also use negative reinforcement by taking away something positive. Both of these methods reinforce the positive behavior. You can also use punishment either by giving something unpleasant or taking away something pleasant. In both of these methods, you're working to decrease the negative behavior. The other thing you can do is extinction, where you ignore the negative behavior. In using this, the behavior will often increase prior to decreasing. We call that an extinction burst. In our three scenarios, Christopher will earn a star for every 5 minutes he is on task and using the replacement behavior. For every 5 stars earned, he gets a reward of his choice. This is an example of positive reinforcement. Becca will not have a preferred activity, her computer time, until she has finished her assigned chores using her functionally equivalent replacement behavior. This is an example of negative reinforcement. Xiomara will earn a peanut butter pretzel reward every time she transitions from the computer using her functionally equivalent replacement behaviors. This is another example of positive reinforcement. Your behavior intervention plan should include a specific target behavior, a functionally equivalent replacement behavior, and a reinforcement in clear language so that anyone working with the child can understand and follow the plan. Your fifth step is to implement the plan with fidelity and collect data to determine if the plan is effective in decreasing the undesired behavior. Using our 3 examples, Christopher started assignments, asked for help, and used the skip card with less frequency as the intervention began. He enjoyed the positive praise and rewards for working on assignments and was able to generalize after several months. The staff who worked with Christopher implemented with fidelity, and data was taken twice weekly in order to determine effectiveness. Becca used her visual schedule and asked for help from a family member for 5 minutes with a few bumps in the road. At first, she escalated her behavior when the helper stopped after 5 minutes. But once she realized her computer was not accessible until the chores were completed, she started to use her replacement behavior more effectively. Data was taken weekly to determine how successful this intervention was. Xiomara was first able to ask for more time, but then did not comply with when 5 minutes were over. For the first week, her targeted behavior continued. Using a first-then visual helped her. First, you get 5 more minutes and move to the next activity, and then you get your reward. She was very motivated by food and was able to start to self-regulate, stopping video gaming with repeated practice. Data was taken twice weekly to determine the use of the replacement behavior and the decrease of the targeted behavior. I hope you found this podcast helpful, and you're now able to help students learn to change behavior using a functional behavior analysis and a behavior intervention plan. Thank you so much to the IRIS Center and their article on functional behavior assessment. It was used as a resource for this podcast, and I hope this helps everybody out there in creating your own functional analysis and looking at the function of behavior with your children. Bye.